Hello and welcome to another episode of Chuchu is a Ranker, and on this episode we are going to be discussing the discography of the Scottish rock band Biffy Clyro. Formed in 1995 and hailing from Kilmarnock, the band consists of Simon Neil on vocals and guitar, and twin brothers James Johnston on bass and Ben Johnston on drums. The band's first three albums saw them build up a cult underground following before bursting out into the mainstream with their fourth LP, Puzzle. Since then, Biffy Clyro have gone on to release 9 studio albums, including 3 which hit the number 1 spot on the UK album chart. The band also managed to rack up 3 top 10 singles and many other top 40 hits and are still going strong today. And as for my own fandom, yeah, I like Biffy Clyro. I think they're a pretty good modern rock band with a very distinctive sound. So, without further ado, let's be complete rankers and rank up a storm. These are the studio albums of Biffy Clyro ranked from worst to best. So, we're going to be kicking off this list with Ellipsis from 2016, which was the band's 7th LP. And this is, simply put, Biffy Clyro in total autopilot mode. The band are fast asleep behind the wheel here, shuffling through the motions and delivering precisely nothing we haven't heard before. Some of the songs, such as the lukewarm ballads Friends and Enemies, Rearrange and the closing People, sound almost comatose in their predictable boredom. While other mediocre tunes like Animal Style and Howl merely come off as Biffy Clyro Paint by Numbers 101. That said, even Biffy at their weakest ebb can still throw out an occasional banger. The opening single, Wolves of Winter, is rad. The track's stark production, super catchy chorus and badass lyrics, briefly fooling you into thinking that Ellipsis might be better than it ultimately is. Herrick's is also a bit of a banger with its combination of bouncing rock and tender interludes delivering the goods. Other decent tunes includes Flammable, which has a nice lift off in the chorus, the emotive acoustics of Medicine, and Small Wishes, which is a slice of jangly fun that houses some very bizarre yet ear-catching lyrics. The wizard shit, and held it under our nostrils. Okay? So yeah, Ellipsis isn't a complete loss, as there are some enjoyable tunes dotted around, and the production is nicely spacious and clean sounding. But there's also no getting around the fact that this is the band treading water and heading towards late career malaise. Thankfully they would course correct after this, but Ellipsis remains a frightening reminder of what late period Biffy Clyro could have sounded like if they had taken a lazier route. 2.5 stars. Next up we have Puzzle from 2007, which was the band's 4th LP. And this coming so low on the list will likely surprise most fans of the band, as Puzzle was the band's breakout album and took them from the indie circuit out into the mainstream. And here we find Biffy Clyro turning in a darker direction than before, as Simon Neil uses the record to process the grief of losing his mother. Indeed, the album features quite a few songs that dwell on mortality and depression, so Puzzle is definitely not the sunniest of Biffy Clyro's work. That said, the heightened misery is not what places this LP near the bottom of the file. In fact, if anything, it's a plus. No, the reason why Puzzle languishes near last place is down to a combination of staid, meat and potato songwriting and dull production and engineering. Compared to pretty much every other Biffy Clyro album, Puzzle just seems so straightforward and uninventive. It's almost like the band were tired and running on empty here, which, due to the grief aspect, they might well have been. Tracks like A Whole Child Ago, Sentimental, Get Fucked Stud, and even the lead single, Saturday Superhouse, just feel so rote and cookie cutter, although I do like the Scottish sounding instrumental break on the latter. As I said in the intro, Biffy Clyro are a distinctive band, but those tracks sound like they could be by anyone, such as their standardised heavy rock clatter. And the bland production compounds the issue, it just feels so anodyne and beige, conspiring to drag even the good tunes down a peg or two. I mean, some tunes such as the post-punky Love Has a Diameter and the maudlin ballad As Dust Dances had obvious potential to be special tunes, but the boring sound palette really works against them and ultimately makes them feel quite dull. Mercifully, there are some really strong highlights that do salvage the record somewhat. Although it still has to fight against its production woes, the opening, Living is a Problem Because Everything Dies, is a good overture with its memorably stabby intro and dark lyrics. As Simon Neil growls, "Everywhere I look, someone dies. Wonder when it's my turn." Who's Got a Match is the most fun tune on the album with its bouncing rhythm and catchy melody. Neil's grief-stricken ode to his late mother, Folding Stars, is awesome and heartbreaking all at the same time, and deservedly became the band's first big breakthrough hit. The closing acoustic number, Machines, has a quiet beauty to it, while 9/15 impresses with its epic choral elements and sinister vibes, as Neil catchily intones, "We're on a hellslide. Help us. Help us." Still yeah, for me Puzzle represents a bit of a mixed bag. Some of the material is undeniably great, but a lot of it is also quite boring. And this results in it being a Biffy Clyro album that I personally don't come back to all that often. That said, the occasional fantastic high spot is just enough to drag it out of last place. 3 stars. Next up we have Blackened Sky from 2002, which was the band's debut LP. And this record is very emblematic of the heavy rock indie scene that was brewing in the underground during the late and just post-Britpop period, as many British heavyset rock bands such as Idlewild, Feeder, Hell is for Heroes and 100 Reasons came climbing out of the woodwork to claim varying degrees of success. Although I think ultimately Biffy Clyro were the most outright successful band from that movement, even though Feeder also had a moment in the mainstream sun too. And this debut by Biffy Clyro is very basic and bare bones. Here you have guitar, bass, drums and voice, and that's it. It's very no thrills. Yet it also manages to show off the band's duality quite well, showcasing both their tender side and their ferocious one. And as youthful, snarling heavy rock debuts go, it's certainly not a bad effort. That said, it's also not perfect, with a few of the songs feeling a little embryonic and undercooked. Despite being one of the album's singles, Just Boy is a bit of a rote noughties rocker that lacks a good hook. The likes of Convex Concave and Hero Management, while having some interesting moments instrumentally, don't have much in the way of vocal melody or lyrical worth, while the electric strum-along closer, Scary Mary, is as dull as the proverbial dishwater. But there is still more material on this that is good rather than mediocre. Joy Discovery Invention kicks the record off with an anthemic ballad that makes for a memorable overture. 27 features a great vocal performance from Simon Neil, his pained howl in the chorus giving the song a good punch of emotion. The duo of Kill the Old, Torture Their Young and The Go Slow offer up some admirably heavy rock that veers between tender low moments and thunderously gnarled guitar crunch. Christopher's River, meanwhile, is insanely beautiful with its arpeggiated balladry humming with a sorrow for friendships long gone. 57 is one of the best early Biffy singles, its strident power pop and catchy chorus hitting an instantly enjoyable rockish sweet spot, while Stress on the Sky has a pummeling energy to its twisting metal assault. I mean, that really should have been the closer rather than Scary Mary. So yeah, this is a basic but enjoyable debut album that sets up Biffy Clyro's stall quite nicely while still leaving a lot of room for growth and improvement. 3.5 stars. Next up we have the Vertigo of Bliss from 2003, which was the band's second LP. And if Puzzle's low ranking was a shock for fans of the band, then I'm sure this being ranked here must have them frothing at the mouth, because as far as I can tell, this album seems to be a perennial favourite for the hardcore faithful among Biffy's fans. But I personally have never truly loved this album. I mean, I like it a lot, and it does have many good songs on it, but I've never quite had the fervent passion for it that a lot of other fans do. And here the band are expanding naturally onward from their debut, adding occasional touches of strings and keys and making their compositions more complex and dynamic. It's definitely a good forward step for Biffy Clyro. But there are some faults that do hold this album in its tracks from time to time. Firstly, the production isn't particularly great here. It feels a little tinny and anemic at times. Plus there are some throwaway tunes here and there, such as A Day Of and When the Faction's Fractioned. They just come off like blustery fillers. But the main issue that really sticks in my craw is the way the record totally falls to pieces at the end. The last two tracks on the album are by far the weakest. A Man of His Appalling Posture is like a much worse version of the aforementioned filler tunes. Well Closer, Now the Action is on Fire, is too fractured and doesn't come together in a compelling way. It's a really poor ending that does drag the entire package down a bit, at least in my opinion. That said, the large majority of the record is pretty great. Opener, Bodies in Flight, is wicked with its epic scale and churning violin-kissed climax. The likes of Ideal Height and Questions and Answers have jangly catchiness oozing out of every pore. They have the words Obvious Single stamped all over them. Liberate the Illiterate has a fun obfuscating structure that points forward to the unpredictable craziness of the band's next LP, Infinityland. Tracks such as With Aplomb, All the Way Down and the gorgeous organ-soaked Diary of Always bring some tender balladry to the table and succeed in their emotive intents. While on the flip side of the coin, the Incubus-esque Eradicate the Doubt and the always twisting Toys 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 Choke Toys 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 bring the badass metal riffage and are suitably thrilling bangers. So yeah, the Vertigo of Bliss is a tricky one for me to rate. It has some definite faults, but for the most part, it slaps. It sort of exists right on the border between 3.5 and 4 stars for me personally. But I guess I'll eradicate my doubt and lean into the more positive aspects of the record. A hesitant 4 stars. Next up we have a celebration of endings from 2020, which was the band's 8th LP. And as the world shuddered and stopped due to the pandemic, Biffy Clyro knuckled down and crafted a pair of intrinsically linked albums. This one a celebration of endings, and the following the myth of the happily ever after. And in doing so managed to bounce back from the rather risky career wobble that was Ellipsis. And yeah, both the celebration of endings and its sister album are genuinely excellent, completely shaking off the autopilot rust and catapulting Biffy Clyro into new sonic waters. And on this LP we find the band turning sharply into art rock and post-punk, yet at the same time they have still retained their links to both metal and pop, and it results in a great fusion of elements that creates a dynamic and fresh new sound palette. In fact, there's very little to complain about here. I only have 2 very minor nitpicks. The first would be the track The Pink Limit, which is comparatively quite humdrum, until it picks up unexpectedly towards the end with a fantastic post-punk inflected instrumental section and at least partially saves itself. The other ever so slight nitpick is that the album isn't quite as good as its following sister record. That's usually not an issue, but because they are so tightly linked and have such similar artwork, the point does at least bear paying lip service to. Otherwise, this is a very good album of art rock. Highlights from a stacked release includes Weird Leisure, which thumps with its interesting time changes, galloping bassline and moody guitar licks. Also the lyric, "When I caught your eye, I glimpsed a black star." It's just pretty damn cool. Tiny Indoor Fireworks has an immediate upbeat jangle pop catchiness that marks it out as a good single contender. Worst Type of Best Possible turns on the post-punk for a dramatic sounding tune that impresses with its thick atmosphere and rampaging climax. Mega Ballad Space is beautiful with its grandiose strings and sweeping star-strewn chorus. It's one of Biffy's most effectively romantic moments. Instant History meanwhile digs up the spirit of Ryuichi Sakamoto with its gleaming synth-lines and towering pop vibes. While Cop Syrup is a great closer that has a good shouty energy and an extended instrumental outro that is just straight up gorgeous. It's the most beautiful instrumental passage the band ever put to tape. But yeah, the consistency of quality here is excellent across the entire tracklist, which ultimately makes a celebration of endings a superb LP and a huge return to form. No hesitancy this time round, a very confident 4 stars. Next up we have Only Revolutions from 2009, which was the band's 5th LP. And this record saw Biffy Clyro at their commercial peak, going 2 times platinum in the UK and spawning all 3 of the band's top 10 singles. Which is kind of fitting, as Only Revolutions is basically Biffy Clyro's mainstream pop rock album. Well, kind of, as it's also batshit crazy in its own way, sharing some of the unpredictable DNA of the band's 3rd LP, Infinityland. But frankly, I wouldn't want it any other way, because Biffy are often at their best when they're at their most demented. And this album's craziness comes from its sense of random variety. It's an LP that seems to have skid-side ADD, always moving in unpredictable directions and throwing delightful surprises at you. It just does not sit still. And this dynamic tracklist is enhanced by the production, which is bright and colourful, and pretty much the polar opposite of the dour previous album, Puzzle. That record had the muddy sound palette of a plate of shit. Only Revolutions, by comparison, sounds like a candy store, it's just bursting with flavour. As for nitpicks, and they are just nitpicks as we're on very solid ground here, I would say that the late album likes of Boom Blast and Ruin and Cloud of Stink merely rate as standard blustery rockers. And Know Your Quarry is a bit of a forgettable ballad. None of those tracks are explicitly bad, but they're also precisely no one's favourite Biffy Clyro songs. Elsewhere though, things get really, really good. Opening track The Captain is fantastic with its upbeat pirate stomp and blasting horns that punch a hole in the roof to let the sun in. That Golden Rule is tons of fun, the track's cavorting metal riffage and extended Suttergon outro entertaining no end. Born on a Horse is totally bonkers with its creaking bass synth and inscrutable lyrics, although I just love the line, I pronounce it aluminium because there's an I next to the U and M. Now write it down slowly and read it out fast. Haha, take that America! The band's biggest hit, Mountains, is a grandstanding power ballad that is instantly catchy. I would say that the mix on this album version is a bit toothless when compared to the original single version, but maybe that's a good thing in the end. Maybe it just lets the emotions shine. Talking of ballads, Many of Horror is one of the band's very best. It's a touching elegy to true friendship. The type of friendship that can survive anything, even the odd knife to the back. As Simon howls, I'll take the bruise. I know you're worth it. When you hit me hard. Mwah! Chef's kiss. That track is just unbelievably beautiful. Well, Closer, Horses, spelt with a W for shits and gigs, is a fantastic building rocker that soaks itself in emotive catharsis. It's a real fist in the air anthem of a closer that ends the record with a powerful bang. So yeah, add in the hazy bubblegum pop rock of Bubbles, the appealing acoustic strum-along of God and Satan, and the woozily rocking Shock Shock, and you have a joyous album of rock and pop that was arguably one of the most fun British rock records of the late 2000s. 4.5 stars. Coming in next we have The Myth of the Happily Ever After from 2021, which was the band's 9th LP and most recent to date. And much like its sister album and predecessor, A Celebration of Endings, this LP was birthed by the pandemic era. But although The Myth of the Happily Ever After could be viewed as being a bit more upbeat than the record it followed, the pandemic in all its awfulness seems to have soaked deeper into the fabric here, with a few of these songs directly referencing or encapsulating the thoughts and feelings of the horrible lockdown era. But it's all done tastefully and subtly. And talking about subtlety, this album sees the band leaning into that more than ever, while also expanding their musical palette to incorporate much more in the way of synths. And this ultimately makes it the most musically nuanced record in the band's discography, as well as the most lyrically direct and mature sounding. In fact, if you were to take a step back from personal preference, in a lot of metrics, The Myth of the Happily Ever After could objectively be touted as Biffy Clyro's best LP. I mean, it's consistent, it sounds great, it's musically complex and lyrically satisfying. It's a record that's pretty hard to fault. To that end, the only negative thing I have to say about this album is the penultimate song, Existed, which is a bit of a humdrum acoustic number. It's not egregious or anything, but because everything else on this package is so damn good, it kinda sticks out like a sore thumb as the weakest cut in a very obvious way. But like I said, everything else on this is great, and because of the more nuanced compositions, the album hangs together as an atmospheric, cohesive piece better than any other Biffy Clyro release. This really does feel like a very focused record that has things to say to you. Highlights on a spectacular and atmospherically salient LP includes the opening Dum Dum, which sets up the vibe of the record very nicely, as Simon Neil turns his eye to the pandemic, sighing, "Nothing has changed. Life couldn't be better. I will ignore all the bodies piling up at my door," before concluding, "This is how we fuck it from the start." Witch's Cup has a slowly building composition and an effusive pop bounce that makes it positively pounce out of the speakers at you. Holy Water absolutely slaps. It kicks off as a simple acoustic tune but gradually mutates into a thunderous, darkly roaring epic. It's pretty damn impressive. Errors in the History of God has an amazing stutter guitar riff that grabs you by the ears and refuses to let go, as the track careens between tender emotions and crunching rock riffs. Unknown Male 01, meanwhile, is a beautifully building slow burn tune that goes from maudlin icy organs to thrashing metal. The track rules hard and shows off the album's attention to detail. While Closer, Slurpy Slurpy Sleep Sleep, has a sleep depriving catchiness to it. Like seriously, try to dig that title chant out of your head, it will not be easy. I also really dig the dark yet beautiful lyrics. Life is a sad song we only hear once. But before the rhythm stops, before it ends, please give love to everyone. Give love to everyone. Well, Simon, I've tried giving love to everyone, but they keep saying no and running away screaming, especially in the park at the dead of night, and now I'm up on some serious charges. Seriously though, chef's kiss for that tune, I absolutely love it. But yeah, aside from Existed, you really can't put a toe wrong here. From the classic Biffy stylings of A Hunger in Your Haunt, to the shoegazy distorted sadness of Denier, to the 1980s new wave theatrics of Separate Missions, it's all really fantastic stuff. 4.5 stars. Next up we have Opposites from 2013, which was the band's 6th LP. And here we find Biffy Clyro getting the bit between their teeth and going big, crafting a 20-track double album that runs 1 hour and 17 minutes. Usually I would say that's too long, but Biffy have gone about things in a very clever way here, as Opposites is a double album in its purest sense, split into 2 separate discs that each have their own identity. The first disc is entitled The Sand at the Core of Our Bones, and focuses on the darker, more maudlin side of the band. While the second disc is entitled The Land at the End of Our Toes and features a much more upbeat set of songs. And by splitting the album so concretely, they've also made it far easier to digest. When I listen to Opposites, I usually listen to only one of the discs, depending on which kind of mood I'm in. But choosing between which album to listen to is not always easy, because both are great. There are 20 songs on this overall package, and I like each and every one of them. Despite its girth, there's just no dead wood to be found here. And stylistically, the band have gone back to basics, peppering the album with short, sharp rockers and compact ballads. While some might see that simplicity as a negative, for me it really works. Nothing on Opposites overstays its welcome, and the album is flush with variety and bursting with easily accessible catchiness. The record is just so damn easy to listen to, and each disc feels like it goes by in a flash. As for highlights, Jesus, where do I even begin? On the first disc you have the stuttering pop catchiness of Sounds Like Balloons, the broken sadness of the title track Opposite, which sees Simon heartbreakingly sigh, "Baby, I'm leaving here. You need to be with somebody else." You also have the light as a loft balladry of Biblical, the hazy psychedelia of The Fog, the crashing rocker Little Hospitals, which has a super catchy refrain as Neil laments, "When you leave, I doubt that I'll remember you." Plus the gorgeous closer The Thaw, which feels wrapped up in icy despair. On the more upbeat second disc you have the thundering bagpipes of Stinging Bell, the lovely arpeggiated guitars and mariachi horns of Spanish Radio, the bouncing funkiness of Victory Over the Sun, the simple yet fun teenage fanclub-esque guitar pop of Pocket, and the super cathartic closing rock anthemics of Picture a Knife Fight. Mwah! Chef's kiss for Picture a Knife Fight, that tune is a banger. But yeah, I could reel off highlights endlessly here, as the record just does not ever let up in the quality department. But I'll stop there or we'll literally be here all day. Ultimately, Opposites is a spectacular double album with great tunes for days, and is also a record that I personally never ever get tired of listening to. 5 stars. So here we are at the top of the mountain, and the Biffy Clyro gold medal is going to go to Infinityland from 2004, which was the band's third LP. And here, seemingly bored of making songs that stick to conventional structures, the band go absolutely apeshit and put together a complex and very strange set of tunes that duck, dive and shift all over the place, constantly defying your expectations of where they might go. And it results in an absolutely thrilling rock record that is utterly singular and unique and feels like it has one foot planted in prog rock territory. It is amazing. Especially as a musician myself, I can't help but marvel at the creativity and the off-the-wall craziness that permeates Infinityland. I mean, how the hell do you come up with the nutsoid chord sequence of Some Kind of Wizard, which really slaps by the way? Or how do you balance the tender emotive balladry of Only One Thing Comes to Mind with its unexpected explosions of metal riffage and blast beats? I mean, the entire record feels like a mindfuck for fellow musicians, which is a lot of goddamn fun. Other highlights from a flawless tracklist includes the pop metal foils of the opening duo, Glitter and Trauma and Strung to Your Ribcage, which are very catchy indeed. The shimmering Incubus-esque My Covery Injection, the thunderous shoegazy wall of snowblind distortion that is Got Wrong, wave after wave with its always churning structure and deliciously proggy overtones. Also, love the melancholic climax to that song. Mwah, chef's kiss, it's just awesome. There's no such thing as a jaggy snake, which hurtles between deranged screams and super catchy indie jangle pop and back again at the drop of a hat. The rope-a-doping The Weapons Are Concealed, which starts with blasting horns and straight-jacketed rhythms before soaring skyward with a great jangly climax. The Kids from Kibble and The Fist of Light, which owns with its crazy catchy refrain. As Simon informs us, these explosions hit me like a fist of light. So yeah, throw in the Maudlin piano dirge, The Atrocity, and the beautifully building closer, Pause and Turn It Up, and you have an absolute masterpiece of an album and one that I love with every fibre of my being. Like seriously, this is probably my personal favourite metal record ever made, and also one of my very favourite albums of the 2000s. 5 stars! So now my deep dive is concluded, the question remains, did I gain more appreciation for the artist? And the answer is, yeah, sure. Specifically when it comes to the band's last 2 albums. To be honest, Ellipsis kind of put me off Biffy Clyro for a while and I didn't really pay much attention to what came after it. That was obviously a big mistake as they bounced back spectacularly. And yeah, I just fell head over heels in love with those last 2 Biffy albums while doing this deep dive. And I'm now looking forward to seeing what the band has in store for us in the future. And that's my list, but of course I know that won't be your list, so why not sound off in the comments and tell me how you'd rank these records? Don't forget to like, share, subscribe and all that other kind of YouTube jazz. Feel free to check out the Spotify Biffy Clyro playlist that I personally curated, link in the description below. Make sure to take care of yourself, but most importantly, just keep on ranking.